Hi, everyone. So we had someone ask a question about how do you know when it's time to upgrade to a new camera body? When do you know the time is right for you? What do you think?
So that's going to differ greatly depending on your circumstance, your finances, all those, a lot of variables there. But what I can do is I can give you some examples of how I went through my journey all the way up to now and the reasons I upgraded. I got my first real DSLR back in 2007 or 2008, I think, when I was stationed in Chicago. And I bought a used Nikon D300. And it was a great prosumer level body, did a lot of the things that I thought were very important for what I wanted to do in photography. And I felt like once I got it, there's a pretty steep learning curve because it was my first DSLR and I didn't seem to outgrow the body. It did all the things that I wanted it to do and then some. I was still continuing to learn real photography at that point. So I held on to that one. I want to say it was 2015 or 2016 that I finally upgraded to the Nikon D500. And at that time, I still had not yet made photography my full-time gig. So basically, when I upgraded from the 300 to the 500, it had been almost 10 years. And I was looking for something that had, a little bit better newer technology that was running, the newer card and things like that. Faster frames per second. It had the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi integration in it, so I could access photos on an app and stuff like that. I was doing a lot of concert photography at the time, so being able to download the photos right there in the venue was a really big plus because I could throw up a couple sneak peeks for the bands. And at the time, I was the only photographer that was doing that. So it was pretty neat. When I started my business in 2017, that was the only camera that I had. I had that one and the D300. So started the business with the D500. And being that I was starting to do more higher end professional level work, being the portraiture, was doing a lot of weddings at the time, and moving into doing real estate, I started noticing some limitations to the camera itself, mainly because it was a crop sensor camera, and I wanted to get some really good high quality optics for it, good high quality lenses, and I wanted to start learning video. So with that, the widest angle pro level lens that the Nikon made for the camera at that time was the 14 to 24 f2.8, and with a crop sensor camera on Nikon, it's a 1.5 times magnification crop. So a 14 millimeter lens wasn't actually 14 millimeters. It was more like 22, something like that, which is too narrow to shoot real estate. So I knew that full frame was the way to go. The vast majority of working professionals work on a full frame camera. So that was when I ended up getting the Nikon D850. So I had the D850 and the D500 together for a while, and then mirrorless came around. And Nikon was a very slow adopter to mirrorless, to their own detriment in some cases. And there were a lot of people that switched to Sony at that time because Sony was at the forefront of mirrorless. They were out there making it happen. And I was very, very close to switching to Sony. I have grown to love the color science that Nikon has with their files. I have built my image kind of around that color science. And regardless of what anybody says, Nikon still has the best raw images in the industry. So I stuck it out and I waited until they made the version 2 of the Z6 and the Z7. And they ended up putting the dual card slots in there, which was very important to me. So at that point, I got a Z6 II. So I had the D850, which was an old DSLR, and then the Z6 II, which was one of the new mirrorless cameras. From there, just kind of started growing and learning with mirrorless and picking up a Z7 II and had the Z7 II and the Z6 II. Because as my skill set grew and as I learned
Learning
more
a lot during that time.
yeah, as I was learning more about the type of photography that I was doing, I started noticing areas where the gear was actually holding me back. There were things that I couldn't do because of the gear that I had. That's one of the biggest indicators for, okay, if that becomes a hindrance to you, then it's time to upgrade. And by that time, Nikon had finally released their flagship camera, the Z9. So I jumped into that and got that. And then a year later, they released the Z8 and now have the Z8 and the Z9. and am finally in a very comfortable space with my gear because I feel like anything that comes up, any type of project that comes up, I can do it with the gear that I have, whether it be photos or video. I don't have any limitations or drawbacks or anything like that. My workflow has vastly improved because I can customize each camera exactly how I need it based on whatever workflow I'm doing with just a couple simple touches of the button. I can go from shooting architecture and real estate to shooting sports and wildlife to shooting landscape to shooting astrophotography. It fits all of the needs that I have, which is important because my needs are very wide. As with any camera system, there's going to be pros and cons. Yeah. And for a while, I could not find a con with the Z8 and the Z9.
Have you found one?
I did. I did.
Okay, what is it?
Concert photography.
Oh.
They are not good for concert photography, and it's because they have an electronic only shutter. There's no longer a mechanical shutter. I do a lot of work with hard rock, heavy metal, that kind of stuff. So very fast moving, very erratic movements on stage and stuff like that. So I need a camera that can run a higher shutter speed, really fast aperture, and can handle high ISO very well. The Z8 and Z9 can do both of those very, very well. The problem comes in with the electronic shutter. Because it's an electronic shutter, as soon as you start getting up above 200th, 250th of a second, you start seeing banding in the image, and there's almost no way to get rid of it. So that's a pretty big drawback, especially for somebody like me who did a lot of concert photography. The good news is that Brenda's looking at getting the Nikon ZF.
Now that you've got where you want to go, now I'm looking at upgrading mine.
Right. Now that she's looking at moving into the Nikon ZF, that has a mechanical shutter. So if I need to use that for concert photography, that'll be an option. That's a good point there as well. Now, you had bought the ZFC,
which I really do like,
a couple years ago, which is a great camera.
I'm running it already.
Right. Now that she's kind of moving from just a hobbyist to moving into a more advanced amateur, more professional level application, we're noticing drawbacks with the ZFC. It is a crop sensor camera. There are certain limitations to the hardware and the software. There are things that it can't do that she's going to need to do for doing headshots and portraiture and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the biggest indicator in when is it time to upgrade is if it starts limiting you, or if it's been a really long time and you got some money burning a hole in your pocket and there's the new shiny thing and you want to try out some of the new technology.
New technology.
Yeah. They're always coming out with new technology, new stuff that's, expanding the horizons of photography. There's a million different reasons to upgrade, but I'd say the biggest reason, if you're in an advanced amateur or hobbyist, advanced hobbyist, or any professional level application, if it starts holding you back from doing things in your job, if it starts slowing down your workflow, especially if you're a professional, if you make money in this industry and it's slowing you down, time is money, and you cannot afford to sit there and kick around with that camera for too long. You have to find something that's going to keep up with your workflow and adjust for how you need it. So, you have to look at that as a business decision at that point. And I know it sucks dropping between $4,000 and $6,000, $7,000 for a camera body, but you end up making that money back in a very short.
You save.
Yeah, and the time that you save. I know that I have increased my workflow leaps and bounds over what I did have with Z6 and Z7 too, to now with the Z8 and Z9. I can work so much more quickly and efficiently. And I couldn't see running my business without these two cameras right if I was on the Nikon system. Other systems, there may be cameras that could have fit for me, but being a Nikon guy, working in the capacity that I do, working in the many different areas that I work, those two cameras absolutely fit my needs for what I need to do.